Councilmember Scott Sherman.
Thanks, buddy.
You want it up here? Wherever you want to be.
Thank you all, and thank you for having me. Whenever RJ asks me to show up someplace, I always make sure I pay attention and show up because he's one of the good guys. I love his energy and what he brings to the community, trying to bring people together. A little bit about myself. San Diego native, well, almost a native. I moved here when I was 4 months old. Was close enough to be a native. Been an entrepreneur, small businessman since I was 24 years old. Started up an insurance company here, or agency, about 28 years ago. Started out with 3 people, built it up to 48 when we sold it here just recently. Got involved and got very successful in the business world. Started getting involved politically with the industry association, because you always want to make sure what government is doing to you and what it's going to cost you at the end as a business owner. And then I started getting involved in the charity world and eventually started, a couple of people asked me to run for office, and well, they asked myself and my wife, either one, they thought would make a good council member, and my wife showed how much smarter she was than me, and she said, "You can do this one, honey." So I decided to try and give back to the community that's been so good to me and to my employees. San Diego's a place that I love. I figured I could bring a business mind to City Hall to try and streamline things and make it more efficient, that you get a better bang for your taxpayer dollars that we take from you. And we've had some successes and we've had some failures, but it's been an interesting world. Can't wait to get back to the private sector in 689 days from now. But overall, in the community-wise, we've had some fairly good successes, stuff that you don't see in the media a lot of times. In the private sector, we don't operate our budgets for our businesses the way we do in government. In government, they do baseline budgeting. Here's what your budget was last year, tack on a few extra percentage points, and call it good for next year. That's pretty much how they do their budget. They don't have to justify what was needed and what's going forward. So, did an audit as chair of the audit committee, found out some egregious examples of how bad baseline budgeting was, worked it through the council, and now we have 2 departments every year actually go to a zero-based budgeting system where they have to go all the way back down to zero and justify all their expenses going forward. In some cases, it's shown savings. Other cases, it's shown where we need to invest more money. But that's the way you do it in a business, is you make those decisions based on every single year going forward, not just what you did last year. It was so bad at the print shop at the City Hall, and we can debate why we have a print shop or not. That's a whole nother debate because Kinko's is right down the street. But in the print shop, they had a line item for forms, $275,000. I thought, okay, it's government. There's a lot of forms in government. Maybe that's justified. We did the audit. Turned out they spent $5,400 for forms. We asked them, why'd you do that? Well, that was our budget last year. Well, when was the last time you went back and justified your budget? I don't know, 12, 13 years ago? That's how you get into those kind of deals where you're spending money because you don't know and don't appreciate where that money comes from. And unfortunately, down at City Hall too many times, the people who are elected to office haven't been in the seats that you all sit in when you appreciate and understand the hard work and where that dollar comes from. At City Hall, you just pass a measure and you expect to figure out how to fill in the money later. I mean, I remember one time we were in labor negotiations and one of the council members turned to me and says, well, we have to hurry up and figure out what we're going to pay our employees so we can set our budget. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, isn't that backwards? Don't I need to know what I have to spend before I can figure out how much I have to pay people? Common sense doesn't reign down at City Hall. But we are having some successes lately. It just takes a lot of persistence. I say it's like sitting on the back of an aircraft carrier with a wooden paddle trying to make it turn. It takes a while to make things happen, but we've had some big successes in the housing world. Housing, as we know here in San Diego, is incredibly expensive. A lot of people are having a hard time attracting talent to come work for them in San Diego because of the high cost of living here and the high cost of housing. That's because we haven't built any middle market housing for a very, very long time. We produced less middle market housing in this city in the last decade than we did during the Great Depression. That's why my daughter lives in Arizona. My son, who's 30 years old, has a roommate, because that's how what you have to do to make things affordable. but we've done a whole bunch to streamline regulations, make it easier to build. Unfortunately, that goes along right now with a big push for taxpayer subsidized housing, affordable housing. Whenever you hear the word affordable housing, we're not talking middle market affordability. We're talking about taxpayer subsidized housing. There's a big push now to make sure that every development project has taxpayer subsidized housing involved in it, and there are union triggers for that construction. I'm okay with inclusionary housing because the alternative is to have all your taxpayer subsidized housing in one place and you end up with the projects and all the problems of the past. So I understand that need. But if it all has to have a union trigger behind it and raise the rates by at least 25% on the cost, that's a real problem for me. And that's what we're starting to see at City Hall a lot, is a lot of pressure from the organized unions on politicians to pass items that are restrictive to union-only projects. By definition, that excludes 85% of the workforce. It just does. It's not fair and it's not competition. It's not what's beneficial for everybody else. We saw it with Pure Water the other day, where we have the recycled water program that's being put into the city now. $2 billion project. Went through council, union only need apply. We're having community choice energy coming before Environment Committee tomorrow, which is competition to SDG&E. Who doesn't want that? You will probably see a provision in tomorrow's stuff before Environment Committee that project labor agreements and only unions are allowed to build the power and the solar facilities and everything else that go along with it. Those are some of the problems that we have when you have politicians who've never really been in the private sector. I mean, I've worked with many people who are council members who started out right out of school as a staffer somewhere. Then they moved up to a council rep. Then they moved up to doing more politics, and they moved into council member and got elected. Never had a job in the private sector. Never signed the front of a paycheck instead of the back. You have to understand where the money comes from. And the problem is we keep throwing ourselves in debt over and over again with good ideas and good projects, but you also have to look at where the money's coming from and what we're doing on the debt side of things. I mean, we heard the other day there's a means of financing debt called commercial paper, which is good. It gives you flexibility and it makes sure that you don't have money sitting in an account paying fees on it while you're not using it. It's a good process. But down there, it's like, hey, wait a minute, we can just fund this with commercial paper. Yeah, it was $75 million over budget. We'll just fund it with commercial paper. It's still debt. But people down there don't understand because they're not the ones paying the bill. They walk away from the job when they're done. You need the attitude of that you are the one paying the bill, personally. Because everybody in this room is paying the bill. Every single one. We're having some successes, small, minor successes, but I worry about the future and I worry about the need for more fees and more income. I never hear it down at City Hall that we need to cut back. All I hear is we need to figure out ways to generate more revenue. Generating more revenue, price increases in the private sector, that's your last resort. That's the last resort. You streamline, you make sure you can do the best you can with the money you have before you're trying to find more revenue. We're also looking at probably some form of rent control trying to be pushed here pretty soon in the city. Even though it failed in the state, they're still trying on the legislative side of things. We saw plastic bag bans, we saw different bans on styrofoam and all these things which affect small business. We got minimum wage coming forward. Those are the types of things that groups like this need to pay attention to. Because too many times we are so busy making sure our employees are getting their paychecks and keeping a roof over our head and making sure that our shareholders are getting paid and everybody's happy, that we forget about paying attention to the little stuff that starts chipping away and starts the death of 1,000 cuts. And that's what we really need to pay attention to. And it's very difficult being business owners to keep involved, but if you have associations that are involved through your businesses and whatever types of businesses those are, make sure that you're down there letting your voice be heard. Because all these other sites have very organized groups that are down at City Hall making presentation. They're at every council meeting, they're at every committee meeting, They know what's going along every step of the way. The business group usually shows up when it's in front of council and everybody's saying, oh, what the heck? So you need to make sure you be involved from the very, very get-go. And this is a good start. This is, these types of groups can make a huge difference. But we need to talk and we need to be heard, because without business, the city doesn't exist. We get our money from taxes and fees. We tax tourists, we tax business, we tax individuals. Without a paycheck from business, all those other fees don't happen. All those people don't have money that we could do the things we want to do with. So business owners especially really need to be involved. And don't be afraid to talk to your employees sometimes. I know in the business world sometimes that's a big bugaboo about what your political philosophies are. That's fine. But let them know at the end of the day, this is what makes me succeed, which makes you succeed, which makes you feed your family.
Scott, if one of the people here had an idea for you or wanted to ask a question, what's the best way for them to reach you? Either a phone, email, what?
Contact my office directly at City Hall.
And what's the best number?
God, you're going to have to make me look this up.
Okay, sorry. I can pull it on my phone there, but anyway.
I give you my cell phone.
And I can tell
give you my cell phone too, but
I have called Scott, and his office has been very responsive.
236-6677.
One more time?
619-236-6677. You'd think after 6 years I'd get this memorized.
Well, I know because you are a classic Washingtonian. I mean, one of the reasons why they want to make Washington king, but Washington said after 2 terms, no, I'm a farmer, I'm a rancher, I'm a grower, I'm going back to Virginia. That's Scott. Scott is a business guy. He gets it. He's there to work for us. And I always remember what you said to me the first time we met, and was, RJ, the thing we need to be asking here at the city is, what can we do for you?
Mm-hmm. How may I help you is basically our
How can I help
motto.
you?
And we've done that a lot in the city, especially for our constituents. The constituency is happy. I won my first election by 54 votes. I won my re-election by 63%. So, I mean, we did good in the community. It's the city as a whole that has some issues I'm concerned with.
Scott is not feeling well, but you wouldn't know it. So if he has to slip out, we'll let him go home and take care of himself. But Scott
Dayquil
Sherman,
is a wonderful thing.
yeah. City Councilman Scott Sherman.
Thanks, buddy.